The Crusades and the End of Feudalism. Introduction. The Crusades, spanning the late 11th to the 13th centuries, were a defining series of events in medieval Europe that not only shaped religious and military landscapes but also profoundly impacted the social and economic systems of the time. Among their most significant effects was their contribution to the decline of feudalism, the dominant socio-economic structure of medieval Europe. The Crusades disrupted traditional feudal hierarchies, facilitated the rise of centralized monarchies, and transformed economies, paving the way for the emergence of the early modern state. This essay examines how the Crusades influenced the gradual end of feudalism, focusing on the redistribution of power, economic shifts, and changes in societal structures. Feudalism, the pre-Crusade social order. Structure and characteristics of feudalism. Feudalism was a hierarchical system based on the exchange of land for military service. Lords and vassals. Lords granted land, fiefs, to vassals in return for their loyalty and service. Serfs and peasants. At the bottom of the hierarchy, serfs worked the land, providing labor and produce in exchange for protection. A fragmented power structure. Feudalism decentralized power, with local lords wielding significant authority over their territories. Weak monarchies. Kings often relied on the support of powerful nobles, limiting their direct control over the realm. Static economy. The feudal economy was primarily agrarian, with limited trade and monetary circulation. The Crusades' disruption of feudal society. Mobilization of lords and knights. The Crusades required significant commitments of manpower and resources, directly affecting the feudal hierarchy. Departure of lords. Many lords and knights left their estates to join the Crusades, often for years at a time. In their absence, their power diminished, and local governance shifted to other hands or became centralized. Transfer of authority. Regents, including royal officials or lower-ranking nobles, often assumed control, leading to a redistribution of power. Monetary demands on nobility. Financing participation in the Crusades was costly, requiring substantial monetary resources. Sale of lands and titles. Many nobles sold land, titles, and privileges to raise funds, reducing their long-term wealth and influence. Royal acquisition of land. Monarchs often purchased or confiscated these lands, increasing their own holdings and consolidating power. Knights and the decline of feudal military obligations. The Crusades altered the traditional role of knights and feudal military service. Professional armies. Monarchs began to rely on professional soldiers and mercenaries, reducing their dependence on feudal levies. Diminished role of feudal knights. The rise of centralized armies and changing military tactics made the knightly class less essential to warfare. Economic transformation and the decline of serfdom. Expansion of trade and commerce. The Crusades stimulated trade between Europe and the East, creating new economic opportunities. Growth of cities. Trade hubs like Venice, Genoa, and Constantinople flourished, shifting economic power away from rural manorial estates. Increased monetary circulation. The demand for Eastern goods such as spices, silk, and glass led to the rise of a cash-based economy, undermining the barter-based feudal system. Emergence of a merchant class. The growing importance of trade fostered the rise of a wealthy and influential merchant class. Challenging feudal norms. Merchants operated outside the feudal hierarchy, accumulating wealth and political influence in urban centers. Urban charters. Cities gained charters granting them self-governance, further eroding the power of feudal lords. Labor market changes. The Crusades indirectly contributed to the weakening of serfdom. Labor shortages. The departure of many men for the Crusades created labor shortages, increasing demand for free labor. Opportunities for mobility. Serfs and peasants found new opportunities in growing towns and cities, reducing their dependence on feudal lords. Centralization of monarchical power. Strengthening of royal authority. The Crusades enhanced the power of European monarchs in several ways. Control over land. Monarchs expanded their territories through the acquisition of lands sold by financially strained nobles. Taxation and revenue. The need to finance the Crusades led to the establishment of more effective taxation systems, increasing royal revenues. Formation of centralized states. The decline of feudal fragmentation allowed monarchs to consolidate power. Rise of bureaucracies. Kings established bureaucratic institutions to administer their growing domains. Legal reforms. Centralized legal systems replaced the patchwork of feudal laws, promoting uniformity and royal authority. Diminished noble influence. The reduced wealth and military importance of the nobility diminished their ability to challenge royal authority. Weakened feudal bonds. The traditional relationship between lords and vassals eroded as monarchs assumed direct control over their subjects. Subordination to the crown. Nobles increasingly became courtiers or officials in royal courts, aligning their interests with those of the monarchy. The Crusades' cultural and ideological impact. Questioning of feudal ideals. The Crusades challenged the ideological foundations of feudalism. Chivalry and religious duty. While the Crusades glorified chivalric ideals, the realities of war and shifting societal priorities gradually undermined the centrality of knightly service. Rise of individualism. The experiences of crusaders and the growth of urban centers fostered a sense of individualism, reducing reliance on collective feudal structures. Inspiration for reform and change. The cultural exchange between East and West during the Crusades introduced new ideas and technologies. Renaissance foundations. Exposure to classical knowledge preserved in the Islamic world laid the groundwork for the Renaissance, promoting innovation and challenging traditional feudal norms. Economic innovations. Banking, accounting, and credit systems developed during the Crusades facilitated economic modernization. Conclusion. The Crusades played a pivotal role in the decline of feudalism, disrupting traditional power structures, stimulating economic transformation, and fostering the rise of centralized monarchies. While the Crusades were motivated by religious fervor and the desire to reclaim the Holy Land, their unintended consequences reshaped medieval Europe, setting the stage for the transition to the modern era. The decline of feudalism marked the end of an age defined by localism and hierarchy, paving the way for the growth of cities, the emergence of nation-states, and the cultural and economic dynamism of the Renaissance. The Crusades, though a deeply religious endeavor, ultimately contributed to the long-term consequences of the Crusades on feudalism. The transformative effects of the Crusades on feudalism extended well beyond the immediate medieval period, influencing the trajectory of European development in significant and lasting ways. By disrupting the entrenched social order, the Crusades paved the way for a new economic, political, and cultural framework that gradually replaced feudalism. The rise of urban centers and the decline of manorial systems. Growth of cities and towns. The Crusades stimulated urbanization by fostering trade and creating hubs of commerce. Independence from feudal lords. Cities gained charters of self-governance, often purchased from monarchs or granted in exchange for support. This autonomy reduced the influence of feudal lords. Centers of innovation. Towns and cities became centers of cultural, technological, and economic innovation, further diminishing the relevance of the agrarian-based feudal economy. Shift away from manorial agriculture. The Crusades disrupted the manorial system, a cornerstone of feudalism. Increased tenant farming. As serfs gained freedom or fled to cities, landlords began leasing land to tenant farmers who paid rent in cash rather than providing labor services. Diversification of economy. The reliance on subsistence agriculture waned as trade and artisanal industries grew, introducing a more diversified and market-driven economy. Economic modernization. Emergence of banking and financial systems. The Crusades necessitated large-scale financing, leading to the development of sophisticated banking practices. Early banking institutions. Financial institutions like the Templars offered credit, loans, and transfer services, laying the groundwork for modern banking. Rise of merchant banking families. Prominent families such as the Medicis in Italy gained influence through their roles as financiers, marking a shift in power from feudal lords to merchant elites. Commercial revolution. The expanded trade routes established during the Crusades spurred a commercial revolution in Europe. Trade.